reality. In-house design and drawing services are available. Come by and see our displays for yourself at the Floors of the Villages, 3935 County Road 216 in Oxford, or Exquisite Design Kitchen and Bath in Bellevue, right across the street from the Bellevue Library. So whether you're looking for bookcases, kitchen, bath, or outdoor kitchen, Cabinet Sales of North Florida is your one-stop source of quality cabinets. For a free estimate, call 352-427-2647. That's 352-427-2647. Cabinet Sales of North Florida.
All right, 25 minutes before 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. We do not have a guest right now, but I have a topic. And by the way, we don't have somebody who bailed out. I kept this slot empty so that we could talk about something. And so therefore, your phone calls will be important if you want to join in on this. But let me take the beginning of this, and then we'll go to the phones. The way I understand some of our history is that one of the reasons we, as a smaller armed force in the beginning of the Revolutionary War days, one of the reasons we were able to defeat the British is that the British had this very regimented way of fighting. Did you ever learn this in school?
Yeah.
Where's your microphone? Here it is. And we were learning from the Native Americans, from the Indians, that you hide behind trees, you do whatever you can to win.
Exactly.
You do whatever you can to win. They were all formal and lining up in a row, and it just obviously didn't make sense. That same thing might be happening in Iraq at our own peril. There are right now in this world 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There are 11 conflicts right now going on in this world that have 1,000 or more deaths per year associated with these conflicts/wars. There are more than that of conflicts that are killing fewer than 1,000 people per year, but there's still conflicts. We have this conflict in Iraq right now, and once again, we're focusing on it, but we don't go to the, we're not sending troops to all of these places. So I wanted to talk about this a little bit. The Iraqi army has 250,000 troops. The Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant or Syria has about 7,000. 7,000, in other words, 7,000 bad guys up against 250,000 good guys. And the bad guys are winning?
Doesn't make sense.
The Iraqi army, the 250,000, the larger group here, has tanks, planes, and American training.
Gosh.
The ISIS, Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or the Levant, which I don't really quite understand the difference there, but they have never had a tank or a plane, and their troops did not get formal training from an advanced military. They basically learned in the field. And yet, the smaller army is demolishing the larger army over there to the tune of the larger army tossing their weapons to the ground and bailing out 2 hours into a battle.
That is disgusting.
2 hours into a battle, they throw down the weapons and leave. And then, of course, then what happens? The bad guys get the weapons.
Yeah.
There's an article that I want to read to you from, written by a guy named Zach Beauchamp. And I don't know anything about Zach Beauchamp. I'm just giving him the credit because that's where I got this information. The Iraqi army has never been disciplined, he writes. In Mosul, Iraq's second most populous city, about 800 ISIS fighters, these are the bad guys, invaded and sent 30,000 Iraqi troops running.
Oh, my God.
800 sent 30,000 running.
That is disgusting.
That is portrayed as a sudden collapse of the Iraqi army, but that's not quite right. The Iraqi army has been collapsing for months, according to Yasser Abbas. Abbas, originally from Baghdad, is an analyst at the private research and consulting firm of Cirrus Associates. Before that, he served as a linguist in the military in Iraq from 2005 to 2009. He was involved in training the Iraqi National Police in Baghdad. The amount of corruption and undertraining was astounding, he says. Insubordination was widespread. They don't really want to fight for their freedoms.
No.
They don't really want to fight for their freedoms. And we're talking about sending our troops back there to do this?
Yeah.
Why? Fill in the blank. What do you think is the real reason? So for Abbas, the military's collapse didn't happen at once. It's been happening for a long time, he says. The governor of Mosul ordered the military units in the area to go to a particular town, and the battalion commander said, no, it was too dangerous.
You're fighting a war.
Insubordination again. And for even when they do fight, many units aren't that effective. They'll stand up with a machine gun, a PKM, and blast off 250 rounds, according to a researcher at the University of Maryland identified as Philip Smith. And he said that isn't true of all the Iraqi units, some of which, particularly around Baghdad, are quite well trained, but many of the ones in the northern Sunni-held regions of Iraq where ISIS made such large gains were some of the worst. So how did the Iraqi army get to be so bad?
Yeah, exactly.
One explanation is sectarianism. The Iraqi government is dominated by Shia Muslims, whereas ISIS and its allies are Sunnis. Perhaps Sunni soldiers in the mostly Sunni Northwest simply ran because they didn't want to fight for a Shia government. That's probably the reason.
Yeah.
They're probably not ill-trained. They probably just don't want to. So then why should we sacrifice another life of our own?
Exactly. Why should we
And
bail them out?
the reason they're going to tell you we should is because otherwise, because this group will then take over Iraq and suddenly be a threat to us and probably team up with Iran. So, I mean, that's what I wanted to tell you, and then I wanted to tell you about an article, about an op-ed piece written by Rand Paul and how Marco Rubio disagrees with Rand Paul on this. I think they are manipulating us. But when you look, what did I say? 11 conflicts in the world right now, 11, that have 1,000 or more people dying per year from the conflict. You have at least 20 more that have less than 1,000. So there's at least 30, which you would call organized conflicts going on right now in the world, right? We focus on only one or two of them, and we sacrifice thousands of our own American lives for these places. There's got to be more to it than they're telling us.
Yeah.
There's got to be more to it.
There has to be.
Rand Paul, in his op-ed piece that was published in the Wall Street Journal, said Ronald Reagan would not have invaded Iraq if Ronald Reagan was president. Reagan believed that the United States should not commit forces to combat unless it was in the vital national interest, had clear objectives and public support, and only with the clear intention of winning. That's the statement of Rand Paul, supposing what Ronald Reagan would have done. The Kentucky Republican who opposed the Iraq War said the rationale for going to war in 2003 did not meet the requirements of the Weinberger Doctrine, which was the Reagan administration's set of guiding principles for foreign engagement designed by Caspar Weinberger, who was the defense secretary under Reagan. Those who say we did the right thing by going to Iraq in 2003 say had we not gone, then Saddam Hussein would have been the next Hitler. Marco Rubio, Florida Senator Marco Rubio, disagrees with Senator Rand Paul. Rand Paul wrote in the op-ed piece that I guess it was that Thursday the U.S. airstrikes would amount to America serving as Iran's air force if Iran commits ground troops to the battle against the terror group ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. Rubio says, I think that's quite an exaggeration. He made that statement, I believe it was yesterday on Face the Nation. If the United States does nothing, Iran will be involved, Rubio said. And if Iran helps overthrow ISIS without American help, he says you can rest assured that a future Iraqi government will be completely 100% under the influence and in the pocket of Iran. ISIS wants to set up an Islamic caliphate in the region from which to base its terror attacks. Rubio also differs from Paul on the threat he sees from ISIS. Rand Paul said yesterday on Meet the Press and on State the Union that ISIS is too busy fighting the Syrian and Iraqi governments to worry about Western targets. But Rubio said on his appearance on CBS yesterday that the state it hopes to set up will give it the ability to carry out attacks on Europe, particularly England and America. So those are the two opinions from Rand Paul and Marco Rubio, and I thought it was really important to point out, because I don't know how many of you have wondered this. How large is the army of the bad guys? How many of these ISIS guys are there? 7,000 is the answer. 7,000. And how many Iraqi troops are there? These are the good guys. These are the guys we trained. 250,000. And why aren't they winning? Because of insubordination.
Yeah.
Because they don't care.
They don't care about
and
their
we're
own
supposed
country.
to care. And we're supposed to care. Why? Because otherwise these two nations will combine and they'll be a threat to us. Well, what about the Korea situation?
Yeah,
Isn't that possible too?
exactly.
See, I really think
Very
there's
possible.
something to do with oil here.
Yeah.
We have a $1 billion embassy. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
A $1 billion embassy the size of how many football fields?
10, I think. Huge.
It's gigantic.
Yeah. Yeah. it's
And why?
huge.
Why do we have such a large facility?
Yeah, exactly. There's more to it.
All right, I said that I would make sure that you all had something to say with this. That's what I have to say. The phone number, if you want to call in, is 622-WOCA. That is the WOCA Climate Control Source Hotline. Good morning. Thank you for waiting. You're first.
Good morning, Larry. You made a great point when you were talking about the sectarian divide in Iraq between the Sunnis and the Shiites. The al-Maliki, he's the leader of Iraq, and his corrupt government is the government that we installed. The most loyal Shiite units are being kept by him near Baghdad to protect him, and the other Shiites in southern Iraq. So northern Iraq has basically been turned over to the Sunnis. And you were talking about how there's might be 7,000 of these fighters in ISIS. Well, as they move south towards Baghdad, capturing town after town, they have militia members and supporters that take over for them behind the lines. So they just keep pushing their force south. And you asked, how can such a small force defeat 30,000 men? And Napoleon said, and I'm going to paraphrase this, but he said, in war, the psychological is as to the physical as 3 is to 1. In other words, the psychological factors are 3 times more important than the physical factors. And these Sunnis that are part of the ISIS, they are fanatics. And the Sunnis that are in the Iraqi army, they don't want to fight their fellow Sunnis. They don't want to fight for this corrupt Shiite regime. So they are melting away.
Yes.
But what's going to happen is, as the Sunnis push further south towards Baghdad, that's the Shiite stronghold. The southern Iraq is the Shiites, and then it's probably going to stabilize. And then you said something about Korea, where there's a North and South Korea. Well, what's probably going to happen is the Sunnis are going to take over, northern and western Iraq, and then the Shiites are going to be in southern Iraq where they're strong, and then Iran will have a huge part to play in that because Iran supports the Shiites.
Yeah, I think so. But still, our involvement is what I want to know. I want to know why we should go there. I'm in favor of the Rand Paul viewpoint on this. Marco Rubio says we should put troops on the ground. Oliver North says we should put troops on the ground. I don't know that I agree with that, as much as I respect both men. But Rand Paul, I think, makes a really good point. Why should we send anybody, especially after all we've done?
Yeah, they don't want to fight for their own country. Why should we fight for it? Let them do what they do.
Can I add one more thing, Larry?
Yeah.
I was wrong about Iraq 10 years ago. I supported our move to go in there, and now I think that was a mistake. But if we support the Shiites, the al-Maliki government of Iraq is Shiites. If we support them with airstrikes, then we are taking a side, against the Sunnis. And I don't think we should. I don't think we should be there. I think we should get our people out of there. But if we use our airstrikes to support the Shiites, then we're going to be taking that side in the middle of a civil war. And I think that would be politically. I think that would be a huge mistake.
Yeah, and that's what Rand Paul is saying. The way I read it.
I don't even want our 300 guys to be there. I want the 300 guys we send in there, the advisors. I want them to be in there long enough to get our people out of the embassy, and let the Shiites and Sunnis settle it amongst themselves. And Larry, I know probably other people want to talk. I don't want to hog the phone. I'll hang up now.
Thank you, Pete. You always make good points.
He's very insightful.
And the phone line is open if you want to call. I know somebody was trying and then bailed out, but the number is available now, 622-WOCA. Rand Paul wrote in the Wall Street Journal op-ed piece that I was quoting that U.S. airstrikes would amount to America serving as Iran's Air Force if Iran commits ground troops to the battle against the terror group ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. So maybe I misread what he was trying to say. Good morning. You're on the air. Thank you for calling.
Good morning, Larry. One of the main things that the main points is what happened with al-Maliki, the guy in Iraq. Not only that the Sunnis are not loyal to him, but they did have an army that was very loyal that we had trained. You know what happened? Most of the generals and commanders that we really trained, he kicked them out because some of them were Sunnis, and so that's what really. So really, the only real people that are really loyal are the Shia and the Sunni and the Kurd. The Kurds are kind of like in the middle. The Kurds could say, we're going to be protected by Turkey anyway, so they don't really care. But what basically happened was, and see, this thing goes back. It's ironic how history repeats itself, because we did the same basic thing in Iran itself. When we had control of the Shah and everybody over there, we screwed that situation up, just like we did in Iraq. I agree with Pete, but I've always felt that way. We shouldn't have been over there to begin with. We went over there with false pretenses. And one thing that Colin Powell said, he said, if you break it, you own it. It's yours. We went over there and we totally, instead of saying, when we got rid of Hussein over there, instead of, they had a pretty good structured army. All they needed was some retraining and stuff. But we put in, we did the same thing with Iran. Like when we had the Shah over there, we put in, we kind of supported al-Maliki, and he kind of screwed us up because he didn't do a lot of the stuff. He was supposed to share the power. Well, what happened, the Sunnis and the Kurds and stuff that he had put in position, when he got control, he pretty well kicked them out. And so he created this monster that he's expecting that, for us, and we're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, because if we don't do anything, certainly Iran is going to benefit from this. But I still don't think that we should put any troops over there. I mean, we had the training. This guy, we have our Secretary of State over there now trying to say to this guy, look, if we help you, we might come and take your butt out, because if we help you and you screw us around like you did the last time, we're not going to tolerate it. And that's what they have to do. They have to impress upon him, if we're going to help you out, because it's not him, it's the government that we're trying to stabilize. But it will never happen unless he create coalitions with the Sunnis and the Kurds. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lenny. I appreciate that. So, again, 250,000 troops trained and given weapons and airplanes and tanks, and they are being defeated by 7,000 who don't have any of that. Mm-hmm. And in that one example of 800 versus 3,000? Was that what it was? Or 30,000? 800 versus 30,000. 800 versus 30,000. Mm-hmm. The 800 won. It is just sickening to think about the fact that they're not standing up for their own selves, and we are being asked to send our soldiers back there.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane. Good morning. You're on the air. What do you think?
Well, Larry, I think your last statement just summed it up perfectly. It's absolutely insane. I mean, here's a question. After all the decades of talking and intervening, has anything improved over there?
Doesn't look like it. I don't know. It's hard to know from what we hear, but it doesn't look like it.
Well, for what's happening now and the terrorism that's going on, it's a no-win situation, is what it is. I mean, you keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. I mean, that's the definition of insanity. And if those people can't see through the horror of what's going on there for themselves and what they're creating and doing, and when you see what Sharia and Islam and extremism and terrorism is all about, in my mind, and I hate to sound arrogant or snarky, but if you have two brain cells to rub together, you should see that they have to be just left to themselves, and that is why, unfortunately, those types of dictators were ruling over there, because that was the kind of treatment that had to be imposed. Otherwise, you see what's going on now: complete lawlessness, complete chaos and horror, and that is really the only word in my vocabulary I can come up with, is horror. And at this point, we need to get out of there. I agree with Pete. We should never have gone in, because again, it's just become a tumble of one horror after another. And for Hillary Clinton to have said in her snarky comment, we saw, he died for the last dictator that went down, and it's just gotten worse. We have no business over there anymore. It's a horror. We can just pray, and we need to think about America, the United States, because we have enough going on here, and it's getting worse and worse. So it's terribly horrible what is going on in this world. Horrible.
Horrible, and you have to wonder if there isn't an ulterior motive. If you look at some of these numbers, let's see. In 2013, let me make sure I have this right. The Iraqi insurgency left 7,818 people dead in 2013. Okay? And that's where we're interested in going. If you go over to the Mexican drug war, 11,788 more people died in that war in 2013.
Oh my God.
And yet we don't send anybody down there. That's our neighbor.
Yeah.
But because why? Maybe because there's no oil. The South Sudanese civil war in 2013 had 10,000 plus fatalities. Again, more than the Iraqi insurgency.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's so much that goes on that we don't know about. And as far as Saudi Arabia, it's a damn shame that the people in government haven't seen through that we need to become energy independent, get that pipeline done, and then we don't have to concern ourselves with other areas where, and just like Mexico, it's so unfortunate, but you know what? Those people in Mexico have to change their situation, just like any other people anywhere else. We, the United States, cannot continue to do what they're doing, and don't tell me that there isn't an industrial complex going on with the weaponry and everything else. And it's just no sense of humanity, just who's going to make money. So
sure.
Thank you for that. No, thank you, Lauren. And just to add to that, it is the intent to show the struggle of humanity in order to get us all behind it. So in other words, we pay attention to the strifes and the struggles of humanity in a country that has plenty of oil, but we kind of ignore the countries in Africa that are they're just African countries. They've got more people dying, but there's oil in the Middle East.
Yeah.
We've got people dying in Mexico, but they've got oil in the Middle East.
Exactly.
So don't try to persuade us to be in favor of sending more American soldiers to die in the name of what you say is human interest, when the truth is it's about oil.
Yeah.
It makes sense to me that that's probably what it's all about. All right, we've got to move forward. Thank you for engaging in this conversation. And just remember, 250,000 people versus 7,000. All right, we've got to go forward. Thank you. This is WOCA Ocala.
Fox News Radio, I'm Pat O'Neill. Secretary of State John Kerry meeting with Iraqi Prime Minister Maliki and other top officials today. Sunni insurgents, meanwhile, have gained more of a foothold and now control border crossings into Jordan and Syria.
Seizing these crossings could help the militants transport weapons and fighters between countries and take them one step closer to their ultimate goal of creating an Islamic state that straddles Syria and Iraq.
Fox News Radio's Emily Wither. A storm system that caused heavy weekend flooding in the Midwest is moving east.
Today, it could produce areas of flooding across states like Tennessee and also into the Ohio River Valley. It is going to be producing showers and storms from the states of Texas up into Ohio.
Fox meteorologist Maria Molina. It's the biggest gain for sales of pre-owned homes in almost 3 years. Sales jumped nearly 5% last month, raising hopes the housing market is regaining ground it lost over the past year. Fox News. We report, you decide.
Policies issued by American General Life Insurance Company, Houston, Texas. Not available in all states. For details, visit AIGdirect.com.